I mean, when I think about an entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think about like, where is the dive bar that people are going to go to? Where is the restaurant that people are going to go to? Where's the park that they're going to walk in? You know, where's the high-speed internet? Where are the co-working spaces? Where are the maker spaces?
It all goes back to infrastructure. Everything goes back to infrastructure. What are we building? Because an ecosystem is built off of an infrastructure.
Where we're sitting at in Saratoga, New York, on Broadway, is a win for the region.
Yes.
This place was not what it was 50 years ago, 30 years ago. And the peak of what Saratoga can be is still not met.
In last week's episode, we talked about creating something from nothing. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So the people who are really invested in this are economic developers, entrepreneurs, and other people who want to create a wonderful place to live, work, and play. I'm super excited today to talk to you with my friends, Jeff Buell and Jahkeen Hoke. We're really excited to talk to you about our experience in the Capital Region creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Jeff and Jahkeen are not only two of my best friends, but they are movers and shakers in the Capital Region. They're interested in real estate, they're interested in business, they're both entrepreneurs, and they have a lot of projects under their belt. This episode is specifically about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Capital Region, but you can apply these lessons to other ecosystems across the United States. Really excited to have these guys on my episode. And if you're a woman in business, this is a really great episode for you because you might not think of economic developers as the initial first person you should reach out to when you're starting your business. And this is important for you because it'll help you to understand what economic developers care about and how it can help you. So I am super excited for this podcast, mostly because we get to reveal the third person in our alliance, who is Jahkeen Hoke. Hi, Jahkeen.
Good morning.
Did you know that we were in an alliance?
Yeah. I listened to the beginning of the podcast from last time, and I'm aware.
Were you aware before that podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause you told me.
Yeah, I did tell you. That's right.
Are you as uncomfortable with this concept of an alliance as I am?
No, I think it could be good if we do it the right way. Or it can just be dangerous for the three
What are
of
we
us.
allying against?
Well, exactly.
Or for?
Well, I actually think it's just that we are a uniform, like in our thought process for the region. We're very, very different, obviously. I mean, Jeff won't even use ChatGPT.
No.
And I'm a full adopter.
So very different. However, I will say that like the way that we move things forward is like, I mean, you hear about projects that I'm working on, I hear about projects that you're working on, and it's like a full backup. We were just talking about this, how there are other people in the region who like undercut actually all three of us sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the alliance is needed. So I'm excited to have you two on the podcast. You are two of my best friends. I text you on the daily, and I cannot remember how we first got together as this little trio. Do you?
I can't remember how. I can remember where we met. We talked about that last week. I can remember where I met you. Mm-hmm. And then I have like this next thing in my head where we were all sitting outside of DP's in Albany during COVID when they put like one table outside and we just hung out at the table and ate when no one else was around. And I remember that happening, but I don't remember how we got there.
Well, I think it's because of you, actually, because John and I knew each other from 40 Under 40 and just like being around.
You were the same year?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, so 40 Under 40, Albany Business Review gives, you know, the best and brightest. Were you 40 Under 40?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
28 years old.
There you go.
Let's go.
Let's go. So we had met there. But I actually think that get together at DP's was your doing. You got us together and you said, the three of us are going to build out a set of people who care about the region.
An ecosystem.
An ecosystem. That's right. Literally. Who are going to be committed to the region for 30 years.
I'm remembering that now.
And then we never built it out between the three of us.
No, but that was the initial intent, was to sit here and say, let's do this. Yeah. And I believe that idea actually came from Tom Nardacci, who said we need a group of people to do this, and I took it and was like, he's right. And I liked you guys in separate interactions, and then we all just got together, and like there it was. And it's super interesting, our dynamic, because we are obviously very different people. Even like on the cover, we're very different people, right? And like my favorite thing about our friendship is that out of you two, I'm the most liberal person in this group. Like I'm convinced of it. And like it's amusing to me that that is the case. And we have these conversations where like you guys will say things to me that I'm just like, what? And it's like, but when you do it, because of the stations that you come from in life, you redirect my thinking on so many things. And that is like, as we're talking about an ecosystem and feeling safe inside of things, it's really important that you have people that can give you this view shed. That's what I love about Ja, right? I've never met anybody that I like as much as I like Ja who disagrees with me as much as Ja disagrees with me, right? Like it is consistent. And I have friends who I disagree with and they're like, well, you treat me like crap. And it's like, no, I just don't respect your opinion, right? And it's just like, you're not bringing to this conversation what I need you to bring to this conversation. And Ja and you both bring to the conversation every time what needs to be brought. And if it's not, the benefit of a beautiful friendship is like, I know if you're off, I know if you're off, and like it can be a quick conversation. We don't need to get into it. But I have this thing in my head from probably about 6 months ago. I called you on a Saturday, and I yelled at this man for like a solid 45 minutes. But I was hyping him up. I was his hype man that day. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And I lit into him in a way where I don't light into people very easily. And like I hung up the call. And I was like, man, today I feel like a good human, right? Like I gave Ja what he didn't need. But by the end of it, he was like, all right, bro. It was so good.
Well, the two of you are like my biggest hype men. Like if I call Ja and I'm like, Ja, I don't know. If
Well,
I can
Ja's a
leave
good
my
hype
job."
man.
Oh,
Yeah.
such
Yeah.
a good hype man.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I
Put
can
the
leave my
battery in the
job.
back.
I'm just gonna like,
Yeah.
waste away there and like, just live there for the rest of my life. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's like, Heidi, stop it.
Shut up.
I handle Heidi differently.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, tell me how you're feeling. Right?
Right. No, you. So both of you have the best like pep talks. But the other day, Jeff sent me a text. This is like a couple months ago. He sent me a text message that was like, I see rainbows and flowers and beautiful, wonderful things. And, not that, but like it was like this like flowing text message. And I read it to my wife and she was like, that's great. I'm so glad you have Jeff because you just need someone like Jeff to talk to you like that every once in a while. And I'm not doing it. And I'm not doing it.
Oh, it's so good.
Well, it's funny because I don't think I even shared this with you two, but there's like two parts of my relationship with both of you guys. And it's like work, professional, career stuff. And then there's like the personal stuff. Right. So in the work, professional, career things, I come to you both for different reasons. I'm going to just say it out loud. But I go to Jeff for white guy things. When I need a white guy answer, I call Jeff.
And he literally says it like that too. He's like, bro, I need to know how a white guy would look at this. And I'm like, this is how we would look at this. And it's like, those are conversations we should be having, right? And I feel like that's why I say it's funny that like like when I say I'm the liberal one of the group, right? It's like if you lined us up and like, here's your career and here's what you do, like I would not be chosen that way, right? But it's like that's the interesting thing about feeling safe. Like I know I'm hammered on this now, but I really do feel that way, right? Now that we've been talking for a while, and you got edits and you move things in and out, but we've been talking for a while, right? And I now feel like if we could clear our calendars and spend 4 hours on this for like the rest of the day, we would be able to start to piece together something that we can actually get to something that's executable. And so then it comes down to like, well, but we don't have the time. And why don't we have the time? Because we're striving to create our own opportunities to feel safe.
So what I was expecting you guys to say around the infrastructure for an entrepreneurial ecosystem or like an innovation infrastructure is the number one thing that I think that entrepreneurs need is healthcare. And that goes right back to safety.
Yeah.
That goes right back to a safety net. It goes right back to the ability to take risk, because the most successful entrepreneurs who break out and do something are in their 40s. And when you're in your 40s, you got kids,
Yeah.
you got family, and it's very difficult to kind of break out on your own if you have to then go find health insurance on the private marketplace.
It's an awesome comment, and we're about to have a conversation that I think will be super meaningful to people. So one of the things that Jah has helped me with was we became very close after the murder of George Floyd. And that was a time where the concept of white privilege really became a thing. And like I did a lot of exploring of my white privilege with you, which he then called out as white privilege. I was using him to do that, which is not wrong, right? But you have been wrestling. You and this healthcare thing are like, you're like a dog on a bone. Like this is super important to you, right? And
That's true. It is important.
It
to
is
me.
very important to you. Like you make life decisions based on healthcare. And when we were wrestling with this a couple months ago, and I was just trying to sit there and listen to you, like I would be there like, Heidi, why are you worrying about this, right? And it's an interesting concept of privilege, because when I started my company, I ended up merging with another group. And one of the things that we did is we just said, well, the company's going to pay for the principal's healthcare. Well, I've never looked at healthcare. I have no idea how much it costs. I just know I've been under this plan for like 8 years, and like I don't ever think about it. That's privilege, right? But it's also a safety, and that I have felt safe and the ability to go maneuver around the things I need to maneuver around, because I have a bunch of these things lined up where it's like I can function here, right? I can function.
And so when I think about economic development, creating that innovation infrastructure, a lot of it does look like, how do you build the right safety net for people so that they have the ability to take risk?
Yes, because you know what I'm never afraid of, and I've taken some crazy risks, right? Like I have bet everything I have probably 20 times that if I'm wrong, I could go bankrupt, right? And like I now have stuff, right? Like when I sign on a dotted line now, it means something. I'm never afraid of the investment I'm taking. I'm only afraid of the variables that are around me, because I trust what I'm doing enough that I can say, like, I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to figure it out. Yeah. What I don't trust is what's the government going to do? And is there something going on in the city I can't control? And are we going to all of a sudden introduce like a rental abatement where we can't charge what we like, all of these variables. But when I feel safe, that's when I execute my best ideas.
It would be very interesting to do, because there are all these maps of entrepreneurial ecosystems. It would be very interesting to map out the ability to take risk. Like, I don't think anybody's really doing that, but that seems to be something that I agree from this conversation is incredibly important when you think about building out an ecosystem. So it's like, where are the safety nets you have for people, not who can help them write a business plan?
Yeah, it's the ability to take risk. And this guy is like, he's about to do it in the most legit way you can do it for the first time, right? Like you're about to do something that's crazy, and like it's gonna work, and he's gonna be fine. But all of these other variables that are leading you to get to there, that's what you have to navigate. That's the challenge. And so this ecosystem that you're talking about that needs to be created, now I'm starting to get fired up about it, is like, yeah, what does it look like so that you can go to Jah 8 years ago and say, you should leap right now.
Yeah.
And what will give somebody the ability to take that step? And that's a real ecosystem.
So I brought you guys here because I want to talk about something that I've been thinking a lot about, which is, how do you start something? Last time we talked about how do you start and grow something, how do you start something and grow it from nothing, essentially. And it made me think about, the entrepreneurial ecosystem that we have in New York State as a whole, this region specifically, that there's a lot of things to be desired for this. And so I would love to just talk about today, how do you be an entrepreneur in a region that does not have an entrepreneurial ecosystem?
I don't think you can. I actually don't think you can be an entrepreneur in an ecosystem and an infrastructure without it existing. You can try, but invariably entrepreneurship is based in like enough people have to be successful for the ecosystem to exist. And when you are operating in a vacuum, I don't think you can.
Little backstory, I grew up in Albany, and one of the only things I wanted to do was like be a business guy, right? I didn't really know what that was. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what the work would be, but I'd often catch myself just like asking my grandmother after school watching commercials, like, well, why are they showing this people on this channel on this same commercial? On I turn a channel, and it's the same product but different people connected to with the people who I just watched on that show. So I'm sitting here at 8, 9, 10 years old breaking down commercials, and she's like, "Well, I don't know." Right? And you take that example and you push it forward, and you go to school and you study business and finance, and you come home, you work for 3 corporate companies, and you try to do stuff in the community to help bridge that gap of the experience that I had in Atlanta and my corporate experience all the way down to the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I think the biggest challenge that I see this area having is, beyond what we all know to be true, like the government and the meds and the eds and all that other stuff, you look at what other cities are doing, right? And I brought a couple props. More Good Jobs is a prop by Martin Babinick. And in the book, he basically talks about how magnetizing cities produce entrepreneurs that thrive and create ecosystems, to Jeff's point. And the reality is this person is from this area, upstate New York, started a company, left, went to Silicon Valley, created a successful company over X amount of years, and his sole mission is to come back to upstate to try to stand up this ecosystem. Another book just as good, what is it, Startup Communities?
Mm-hmm.
How to build a entrepreneurial ecosystem in your community. One of the first books I read probably in 2012, 2013 that talked about creating these spaces where, successes, failures, triumph, and, really has a place. And when you look at this community, it's really hard for that place to exist because the concept of an idea, to your earlier point, is always backed or, fought down by opinion. And I was listening to a podcast leading up to this, coincidentally, about building ecosystems. And it was the founder of Booking.com. And he talked about one of the things that I took away, and me and Jeff were talking earlier, about the importance of an idea, right? An idea, to whatever degree of a definition, is something that has not been figured out, but it's a thought to a problem, right? And the challenge that we have here, we're such a, blue collar / service sector economy that ideas really don't get past the opinion. And what he was basically referencing was the challenge with ideas, and we are not in an ecosystem. The point was, if you have an idea and the only people you talk to are in proximity to you about this idea, the likelihood of that idea being good or bad is not based upon it being a good or bad idea. It's just based upon what that person was feeling at that time, right? They'll tell you, oh, it's a great idea because it's your mom and they like you or they love you. It could be your sibling or
I do
a
think
friend.
my mom likes me.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then the other part of it is they'll tell you it's a bad idea because they don't want to see you get hurt. They don't want to see you take a risk and fail. And his point was, when you're in a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem, your proximity to people who are relevant in that space to give you the answer about that idea is more important than being around a bunch of people who care about you. Because if you, like he said, if you had an idea about a travel company being online and one day you wanted to sell that company and you went and gave that idea or asked about the idea to someone who started a travel company and sold a bunch of websites for millions of dollars, that person has the relevance on that topic to give you the answers about your idea. And the challenge in this economy, in this marketplace, is that when you have limited people who have, to whatever degree, limited entrepreneurial success, and they are not either in a position to, or a platform to give it back to you, it's it's really hard to get to a place where I'm inspired to thrive against the triumphs and the successes of being an entrepreneur. And the second piece that he said was the difference maker for San Francisco, and I'm referencing the Booking.com founder, not Babinick, was basically they socialized business, right? Everywhere they went, coffee shop, dinner, lunch, barbecue, doesn't matter. Everyone's talking about business. How to do it better. How can I help you? How can you help me? How can we grow? What do we need? What resources exist? And let's push it all forward together.
This episode is brought to you by the Tech Valley Center of Gravity. In today's show, we talked about what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and the Tech Valley Center of Gravity is a huge part of Troy, New York's entrepreneurial ecosystem. They're a makerspace right in downtown Troy. They have tons of equipment that you can use in order to make products and other things for your business and really get your prototypes off the ground. On November 15th, they're having their annual awards dinner, which is a plated dinner that is also going to have a bar and is going to be at the Country Club of Troy. And you should definitely check it out if you're interested in supporting them, and also head down to their space in Troy, New York. I'm proud to sponsor the annual awards dinner for the Tech Valley Center of Gravity, and I hope to see you there.
Right. And so you create all these very successful individuals who create very successful companies, and people are working together for this shared vision of we want to make the biggest, best companies that solve the biggest problems that we see. That doesn't exist here. And so even in Babinick's book, I got to part 1, and one of the lines, and it was like, for anyone who reads this, please keep reading. And it was so hard to keep reading because the last part, or the last chapter in part 1 was basically like, if your city's not growing, it's dying. And if the city's dying, you can't be there and you can't be successful. And so I closed the book and was like, I don't know if I can continue reading this. I will continue to read it if he's listening. But the point is, the next part of the book was creating a magnet city, right? Because if you want an ecosystem, you have to be able to attract the people. Mm-hmm. And the challenge, and this is where me and you always agree, me, you too. But when it comes to real estate and like the experience that people have, right? Developers and people who are in economic development ought to be creating places where people have a sense of that they can thrive there, right? It's not tangible. It's not something that you can just pick up and take off the shelf. It's a feeling. And you walk through our cities and you walk through our neighborhoods. If you don't feel that, how could you ever attract the people who can get that in every place that is considered a magnet city?
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out, right, is like, what are the components of a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem? What can economic developers do, and what can't they do? Because there is a huge element of what you just described that cannot be helped by the state intervening in creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem, like, period.
You could remove the word entrepreneur from the questions you just had. You'd have some societal questions that are the exact same, right? So I was talking this morning with a state senator about last night's election. So we're taping this 12 hours after the election. And, you know, there was some commiserating and wound licking. And I said to this person, look, politics is about 2 things. One is, do people feel safe? And there are branches that come off of that, like what is safe? And you can... You know, it can veer into a number of different things. But the other thing that Jah just said is, and I can show this to you in a text this morning. I said this: people need to feel like they have the opportunity to prosper, and under that are things like affordable housing and livability and walkability and playability and all those things. But like the idea that as a person, I woke up this morning and I thought, okay, I have the ability to live a good life today, and we're falling flat on our face in that measure here. We really are. It's bad.
Some hard truths.
It is. I mean, it's just a reality, right? Like you can just have conversations with people and they feel stuck. People feel stuck here, right? Like this is just what we are, and no one exemplifies that frustration better than Ja when he's in a mood, right? And he just starts ripping, and you're like, all right, I'm just gonna chill for 30 minutes, and he's gonna get everything out because it's a lived experience where prosperity here is very challenging. And what I love about my friend Ja is he's a well-read intellectual, right? That's how I would describe Ja. He's a well-read intellectual. And in Albany and in upstate New York, you have to throw that book out because nothing works the same here, right? And you got to sort of create and invent your own way to get there, and it's very challenging.
Yeah. Well, but in defense of Albany, and to add to that, I appreciate that. I have this little saying, right? Like, everyone knows the first part, which is if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere.
Sure.
My part of it is if you can make it in Albany, New York, you
can
make it on the moon. Because, I mean, the barrier to entry, although they may seem very low on first approach, once you get past those initial barriers, it's like, oh my gosh, right? We're climbing Mount Everest to do the thing that we all say we all agree upon, but when the rubber hits the road, it's like, well, we can't do that. Why would you want to do that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, we don't do it like that here. And then it becomes, well, what do we do here?
You know, I like your visual of Mount Everest. I would tweak it a little bit because the concept of climbing Mount Everest implies that when you get there, you will have this sense of euphoria that you accomplished something. Mm-hmm. And the real problem with our region is that there's no win, right? So it's not, you can't win here. There's nothing that you're just like, oh, look at what I've done, and like I can feel proud of that.
Right.
And so the bigger challenge for me is it's not climbing Mount Everest. It's walking down Pearl Street. And instead of like an incline that's taking your breath away, there's bricks being dropped on your head. Mm-hmm. And they're proverbial. Like they're not, it's not like they're not actual bricks, but there are people that are lobbing things at you constantly here out of some very bizarre sense of like self-importance where they feel like they have say over the path that you're on. It's a very odd place where we live.
So here's a hot take from me. Thanksgiving is very late in November this year, so I am giving you all permission to put up your Christmas decorations before Thanksgiving because you really want to be able to enjoy your Christmas decorations. And if you don't do it before Thanksgiving this year, you're just not going to have enough time to have that fa la 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 la. And what I would say that hopefully is affirming for the people. So this podcast has a primary viewership and listenership of women who are trying to start and grow their own business, right? And so I think sometimes, we're kind of taught, or all entrepreneurs are taught, but I think, especially women are taught, if you're not making it, it's your fault.
Yeah.
If you're not making it, it's your fault. And I have to tell you, it is, I would say, the farthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
That if you're not making it in Albany, it's your fault. That is not true at all. It is the, for lack of a better term, I don't even know if I like this term, but it is the ecosystem that is around you.
It's 100% the ecosystem around you.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say that because the cool thing about us is we can just go, right? We can just go. I have inside of my career, I have about 50 commercial tenants I've had over the last 10 years. And the vast, vast, vast majority of them are women-owned businesses, and they're mom and pops, onesies and twosies, right? And they're just ripping it. I'll shout out Chelsea Heilman in Schenectady, who has Take Two Cafe and Unbreakable, the vegan barcade that we built. And this is a woman who works 85 hours a week in 2 different places and is absolutely crushing it. And if you went and talked to her right now, she's exhausted because the support isn't there. It's just the support's not there.
Yeah. And what I try to think about is, there are tons of people, and this actually, I really like the point that Ja made that, you can't have people around you who like you, right? That's the whole, there's a good book that I assign my students, the mom test, right? Like you can't be asking your mom, hey, is this a good idea? And I do feel like we have a lot of people who are trying to help in this region. They're trying to create, they're trying to help, right? But, I went through, I had that little software company where people were trying to help me, and it was like terrible help, terrible, bad advice, awful. And to be honest, that was like pre-Toast, that was like just when Square came out. I could have created a huge company with this problem that I had seen, but, people were just to be frank, just not helpful, right? And so as I'm thinking about how do I contribute back, not just to this ecosystem, but how do I contribute to other ecosystems? It's like, okay, I need to draw a line. Like, what can economic developers do? And what do they do successfully, right? And what should they really not do? Because and I like your idea of like giving the wrong support. They're giving the wrong support.
It's spot on. Yep.
Well, and even let's just talk about it, right? Let's go straight at it because we're tiptoeing. This place, right? I think, and I'll go back to your point about the top of the Everest, right? And what is the win, right? Because that's also part of the problem. Back to what I said. Well, what do we do, right? Nothing's been defined here. This place has lost really, truly opportunity since the industrial era left the Northeast.
Yeah, we've been on a decline since the 1890s.
And so I would almost say where we're sitting at in Saratoga, New York, on Broadway is a win for the region.
Yes.
This place was not what it was 50 years ago, 30 years ago. And the peak of what Saratoga can be is still not met, right? It's going to go further and further and further because some of the opportunities in our marketplace is our environment, right? It's 70 degrees outside right now. That's not going to change. And, so I say in the long term, there's so many reasons and so many opportunities for wins to happen. The challenge that I see, and I'm going to call it what it is, we still live in a place where title and people wanting to be liked, not be great, is what's holding this place back. And when you ask about economic development, it's almost like if you go to a hospital and you're like, well, I need to see the doctor because the doctor is the one skilled and experienced and surgeried and had so many experiences with the thing that I have, I can't talk to the nurse. The nurse is the practitioner helper. And the nurse, although the nurse can assist, they may not be able to give me the answers exactly how I need it and set me up for success. And in this community, there's a lot of people who are in positions with titles, access to resources to help, but because they don't have the relevance, back to my point of proximity versus relevance, they are in the right position in proximity to where we need to be, but a lot of the times for the problems that we are fighting for as people who are trying to solve things, if it's housing, if it's creating businesses and solving gaps in the marketplace, they don't have the experience to give us the help that we actually need. But they are also the thought leaders and the people holding all the resources for the solutions.
So if you're a founder who is thinking about pitching investors and are nervous about the way that your pitch deck looks, there is a service called Hate Your Deck. Michael Lightman and I are very good friends, and he's developed this proprietary method for putting together pitch decks. And, I do see a lot of template pitch decks when I see founders pitch me, and those pitch decks are not super effective. So if you're interested in developing a very customized deck, you should reach out to Michael at Hate Your Deck. His email and his website are in the show notes. I do know he's going to be offering some live courses soon, which might be a good option for you if you are interested in developing a custom pitch deck. So when you think about the indicators of success for a community, like a key performance indicator or a KPI, how does homegrown talent fit into that?
Good. Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I'm glad I worked at GE because I wouldn't know what a KPI is. But, for me, as being someone similar to Jeff and you as well, being born and raised in a community that I left and like literally as primitive as human existence can be, I literally left, went out, garnered some resources, some information, and some tools that I brought back to say, hey, us in a cave, there is sunlight outside, right? There are things beyond our existence here that actually exist. And here's some ways that I saw that I think can solve some of these problems here where we're at. And our ability to, one, attract that group of people, really put them in a position where they can create and innovate and then propel them is so important as metrics of success for our area, right? So first thing, it's how much or how often do people who, went through K through 12 from our area leave, come back and work for the employers in our region and then supported beyond their employment for an employer in our region. Because if we can, and I'm not saying those are the concrete metrics, but the thought for me is, and this is a conversation that we always have, like, well, you seem to move around a lot, right? You've had so many jobs. And for me personally, I don't take it as a offense or a slight. One of the best opportunities that I ever had was working for General Electric. And literally the motto internally at General Electric is every 18 months you get a new job. So every 24 months you should be doing something new. Because in order for you to move through that company and that structure, you have to learn new things. You have to go solve different problems. You have to go take what you learned here and bring it over there because they may not have that exposure. So it's almost like a microcosm for what cities should be doing. But the whole ethos and thesis of a corporation or a company is to solve complex problems. So I go back to what is the goal of your marketplace? Because the ecosystem responds to that or it doesn't exist. And so right now we're living in, again, upstate New York, the capital region, which also I think needs to die. And I'm going to say that on a podcast. Capital region is stupid. For every state in America, there's a capital region. What makes Albany so special that it has to call itself the capital region? Anyways, it doesn't say capital region on the airport sign. It doesn't say capital region anywhere. It says ALB, Albany. Anyways, moving on. The point is, for good KPIs, good metrics, you have to have a goal. And right now, in this community, in this marketplace, I don't know what our goal are. I don't know what the goal is. And it's hard to build that ecosystem around some of the goals that don't exist. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see challenges and problems in the marketplace on the ground. And it doesn't take a genius to come up with an idea to solve that problem. But what it takes is everybody in between the solution and the idea has to come together to support that ecosystem. And so some of the core issues that I believe, again, one of the big ones is we do not support the talent that's born and raised in this community. I don't care who you are, where you're from, it just doesn't exist. So if I'm coming to, going to college in a city and I see the local people aren't benefiting or doing things that they want to do, what makes me special? It's just a common knowledge thing, right?
So thanks so much for joining me. So for this podcast, one of the things that I want to talk about is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And, we're sitting in Saratoga Springs, so I want to focus the conversation on what is begrudgingly called the capital region, or, Albany, Saratoga Springs, Schenectady, New York, Troy, New York. And what I really want to talk about is, first, what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem? We hear this all the time, or at least I hear this all the time in economic development. And I think it's this thing that's super amorphous for people. And it's really a combination of a ton of things, right? And so I'd like to talk about, what's commonly known as live, work, play. what's commonly known as the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and if we can just kind of break it down for people as what that is.
I don't value the concept of an entrepreneurial ecosystem as much as I value the concept of a lived ecosystem where people want to be. And I think that the entrepreneurial piece of it will blossom out of something where it can just grow organically. If like-minded people gather in one place and want to stay there, naturally an ecosystem will be created for entrepreneurs.
But how do you help start that?
You have to make your place better. One thing that Jah's not said today that Jah's pretty consistent in saying is that we will likely end up being a climate refuge area for the next 100 years, where people are going to stop having the ability to choose where they want to go, and they just have to go where they have to go. And it's an unbelievable opportunity staring us in the face where, what Jah said before was it's 70 degrees outside and it's not going to change. Well, we know it's going to change. It's probably going to snow in 2 days. But what he meant was this better weather is going to continue for us. And though it's a detriment to everyone else, people are going to have to move here. And if people are suddenly going to have to move here, then what we actually have for the next 50 years in front of us is an opportunity to build an ecosystem in which entrepreneurs can thrive. So what do they need? And that is, they need a lot, right? And I think, though I say they need a lot, processing in my head right now, they really only need two things. They need money and access to it at some point, and they need an environment under which they can mentally and creatively thrive.
So here's a serious business lesson for you. As you heard in today's episode, we talked about creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I have to tell you that economic developers are very interested in helping you do that. As an entrepreneur, you might not think of an economic developer as your friend, but I promise you that if you reach out to your economic development organizations, whether they be government, quasi-government, or not-for-profits, they are interested in helping you start and grow your business and are a great place for you to start your journey. When you call them, tell them that you're developing a business that's going to create thousands of jobs. Just kidding. You only have to tell them that you're creating a business in their community and that you want their help. And people are trying to develop, again, we're kind of using this term entrepreneurial ecosystem, but this is just a very economic development term.
Yeah.
And people are trying to create that across the U.S. And so I think that, what we don't realize is that we're in this kind of competitive space with entrepreneurs. So how do we attract entrepreneurs here? And I love the two things. I mean, when I think about an entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think about where is the dive bar that people are going to go to? Where is the restaurant that people are going to go to? Where's the park that they're going to walk in? Where's the high-speed internet? Where are the co-working spaces? Where are the maker spaces? And I feel like we have all of that. And so for me, again, thinking about focusing this conversation on the capital region because that's where we are.
That's what we know.
And it's what we know. But also acknowledging that other people are trying to do this. I think we have very strong opinions. And the reason I brought you two on the podcast is we have very strong opinions about, what people need to make them thrive. And to be honest, it's very complex web. It's a super complex web that I think sometimes people try to attack it at the source. So they give, for instance, business plan courses or things like that, which they think is helping an entrepreneur develop their business. But really, if you're not integrating a whole real estate strategy, just a whole strategy for downtown building, and I think I don't want to be presumptive, and I'd like to have you both talk about this, but there's a huge opportunity for small cities across America right now. A huge opportunity for small cities across America to attract entrepreneurs. And so I wake up and I think about how do we do that? What is the path to do that? Literally, what are the steps that we need to take in order to attract entrepreneurs to these small middle market cities and to support them in rural settings?
I think we're tiptoeing around the thing. 2-hour-long conversation on a Saturday, past Saturday. A good friend of mine works in government, at a high level, and I think everyone's coming to the same conclusion at the same time. right? We're sitting here the day after the big election, 2024, and I think everyone's cup has ran over. I don't care what side of the party you're on. I don't care what you do for a living. But there's some stuff on the ground that just, like, if you're not doing the basic stuff, you won't get a high functioning government person, healthcare person, education person. And you're definitely not going to get an entrepreneur. And so if I walk into my city or I drive into my city and the first thing I'm met with, right, is someone with their pants down peeing on the corner and no one cares. Like, I don't feel safe. If I can't go to the grocery store without being harassed, right, I don't feel comfortable. If we can't deal with basic things, we can't do the more complex things. And so when we talk about our cities and we talk about economic development, it's like we have to be able to deal with the most challenging things that can be looked at as controversial. They can be looked at as racial. They can be looked at as stereotypical government policy. If we can't do those hard things with some real strong and like will, forget political, just will, period, then we can't get to an entrepreneurial ecosystem where people can walk outside and say, you know what? It's a beautiful day. I have this cup of coffee. I'm going to walk to the park and I'm going to think of some great ideas. But what ends up happening is you don't feel like you can walk, so you get in your car and you speed through the neighborhood, so you don't really get the sense and the feel of the vibe of the neighborhood. You go to that coffee shop and you're like, you don't feel like you're a part of the community. It's just like, I'm just in commute. I'm in transit the whole time. And I'm like closing my mind off just to get to my destination. And that's typically what happens. What I think we're tiptoeing around is what makes some of the biggest and best cities that get it right. I'm pretty sure when you are in those places, you feel safe. You feel like your back is protected. And you feel like, oh my God, like I can do just the same over there. Like I'm inspired to go do something great. Like you walk through New York State Capitol and you're like, oh my, like it's literally one of the best buildings in the state. And it was built twice. And 2 times, the state capitol of New York was the largest construction project in America's history. And you feel that gravity when you're walking, and then you can walk down the street and you're like, where am I? And so to have that worldview difference a block away is a problem. And not having the feeling that we can openly, publicly talk about these things without getting backlash, like, who are you? And you're an elitist, or, you know, you can't say that, from all sides is a problem. And so, you know, I think, again, that's a non-tangible thought. It's a reality that we have to deal with. And it's like, to Jeff's earlier point, if I have to go into a negotiation and think about what that person has to give up to support this great idea that solves a problem or makes the life better for all of us, like, you shouldn't have to work that hard. Mm-hmm. Like, that's harder than the actual thing that he's trying to do.
So hi, I'm Heidi, belated introduction. I'm a consultant. I typically work with economic developers and founders and other people who are interested in building out an entrepreneurial ecosystem. If you would like to work with me, find me at my website, HeidiKnoblauch.com. And that's linked in the show notes.
I think one of the interesting things about what Jah just said was, in my head, I had said to you, what I think is necessary is you need to feel safe, and you need to feel like you can prosper. And I'm amending that after listening to what Jah just said to, if you feel safe. And safety can be a physical presence in a city, or financial safety, or mental health safety, right? If you feel all of these things, then you will naturally feel like you can prosper. And so this concept of safety inside of how you are operating is probably the most important thing in an entrepreneurial ecosystem. If I understand that I'm in a safe space, taking that like term that just was created a couple of years ago and flipping it on its head. If I'm existing in a space where I know you support me and I know you can find my capital and I feel safe, then I will naturally feel like I can thrive. And we have created an ecosystem in which entrepreneurs can be successful.
So basically building out a way for people to take risk.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's exactly right. Right?
Yeah.
And we do it in a way where, we got so sidetracked on this whole concept of like what we're doing here in this region and the problems that we're having because we are all living that every day, right? You're talking to people who are actively trying to solve problems right now. And so that naturally flows to the front. But if we're taking it way back to 30,000 feet, then what I need as an entrepreneur who invests a substantial amount of money in things on a daily basis is I want to feel safe and I know that people got my back.
Yeah. And so I think oftentimes, so something that I tell entrepreneurs all the time, and I think especially for the listeners of this podcast who are thinking about, if they're going to start their own business, right? I think sometimes the people who are on this podcast have started their business. Other times they are about to start their own business. And what I tell them all the time is the government has an interest in you starting and growing a business. They just don't know how to express it properly. And I think that people are shocked by that. I had no idea what the term economic development was when I moved here. I had no idea what the term economic development was when I started Plum Oyster Bar. And it was kind of baffling to me that people were interested in having a ribbon cutting for that business. I had no idea why that was important to them. It was important to me. I had no idea why it was important to them. But now I know it's because it ties back to how do we create a thriving downtown? How do we create jobs? And I think sometimes governments just need a translator for how they're going to do that for entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs also need to know that the government really does want them to succeed. Truly. They just sometimes don't have the best programs or the best ways to express that. Is there a time, just as you guys were starting something, starting something from nothing, was there ever a time that the government stepped in with a program or something else that was supporting entrepreneurs that was super helpful that you saw?
Yeah, I would say in New York State in particular, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative has been a really great program that New York State has executed, right? $10 million into specific downtowns so they can build out programs that can go to nonprofits. It attacks actual infrastructure. And if you go look at where the cities around here that have been a part of that program, none of them have spent bad money, right? Years later, everything looks great. There's excitement around the program and it works, right? So targeted government investment is always beneficial. And it is also how the country was created. Right? The country was not created on the backs of entrepreneurs. The country was created on the back of taxpayers who built roads and built sewers and built an infrastructure in which people could feel safe and thrive. Right? Like it's not hard to understand how we got to this point. We've lost our way though, right? And we don't invest in small or big I infrastructure. We just ignore it. It's not sexy, it's not cool. We want jobs and really we need curbs and no lead pipes and sewer outflows that don't go into our river. Like we need these small things because I live on the Hudson River. I have a balcony that overlooks the river and I have a bald eagle that lives in the tree just outside of my house. It's awesome. I can't put my foot in the water, right? And like those are the things where like all right, in 30 years we'll be able to, and here's this infrastructure. It all goes back to infrastructure. Everything goes back to infrastructure. What are we building? Because an ecosystem is built off of an infrastructure. So yes, targeted government investment is absolutely necessary.
I'll add to that, you look at things like Metroplex in Schenectady. That is a transformational government-supported policy and investment.
What's Metroplex?
So I'll let Jeff explain what a Metroplex is because he's entirely involved in it.
Metroplex is a quasi-governmental entity that was created 20 years ago that rips a half of 1 point of sales tax off and goes into economic development. And we have to be careful with Metroplex because it works, and so we want to mimic it. But we need to pause for a moment and say that it works because the person who's been in charge for 15 years is really good at what he does. And so Metroplex right now is personality driven by a guy named Ray Gillen, who has proximity to the money, is a good listener, and is intent on creating a sense of place. And so while Metroplex teaches jobs, and I've been a big I've benefited from their targeted government investments to get jobs, they have also done things like they gave me $125,000 to build a patio outside of a restaurant. That's the best patio in Schenectady that the restaurant couldn't afford and I couldn't afford, but they had this money to pay for it. And now when you drive by it, you see 50 people outside between March and October eating, and that's an infrastructure and that's an ecosystem where I can go have a meeting there and chat with people because I want to be there and I feel safe and things can grow out of it.
Spot on. It's a great example of how, government plays a role, and it marries when you have the right person, to Jeff's point about Ray Gillen, and you have an apparatus that is the vehicle for what the goal is, right? And the goal is we want a prosperous, thriving Schenectady with an amazing downtown that highlights, good food, good experiences, good entertainment. Then here's the vehicle and the apparatus that we need, and here's the person. I think when government gets it right, it does really well. But you need so many things to happen to get that right. And I think, so the example when government gets it right is Metroplex. But you also have to be in a position where the people are there and the interest is there. And I think the opportunities that we have in the capital region of New York, which just needs to be Albany, New York, by the way, is getting the right people with the right apparatus and vehicle to achieve the goal that we all believe is a goal, or a slew of goals that we all can agree upon. I think that's a challenge for this marketplace, but I think it's also an opportunity for other places to say, because how you build something, you also have to define the how and the what. And here, we don't know necessarily what we want to be, so we can't define how we get there. Schenectady is a great example of they defined the what, and then the how came about.
So thanks for joining me for this awesome episode. It was great to sit down with Jeff and with Jah and talk to them about creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem in the capital region. I hope you learned a bit about what economic developers do, what they care about, and all of the systems that exist and are in place that you can plug into to help your business start and grow. Please reach out to me if you have any questions whatsoever from this episode, and I hope to see you next week.